I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 12. Let's focus on verses 18 through 23. Samuel called on the Lord, and on that day the Lord sent thunder and rain. As a result, the people, all of them, greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. And Samuel replied, "Don't be afraid. Even though you have committed all this evil, don't turn away from following the Lord. Instead, worship the Lord with all of your heart. Don't turn away to follow worthless things that can't profit or deliver you. They are worthless. The Lord will not abandon his people because of his great name and because he has determined to make you his own people. As for me, I promise that I will not sin against the Lord by ceasing to pray for you. I will teach you the good and the right way." 1 Samuel 12, verses 18 through 23. As a young musician in my early 20s, I had followed the Lord for the first time, and I dropped out of college. Felt like the Lord was calling me to get into the Christian music business. And nobody else in my family quite heard the same calling. So I was doing double duty. I was following the Lord, and I was trying to legitimize my decision to follow the Lord to my folks because they didn't quite get it. I thought I would silence my critics with a record contract. I prayed and I worked hard and I negotiated even harder, and eventually I landed a record deal. I remember sitting with my attorney as we read through my contract, and he said, "You know, the word contract means to bind, right? Like a boa constrictor is contracting his prey." We had a big laugh that day. But several years later, it wasn't quite as funny when my career goals didn't match up with the record company's business plan. And yet, there we were, leg ironed like two prisoners disputing over which direction to run. By the way, if you're ever in leg irons and you're trying to determine which way to run, you always run eventually in the direction of the biggest inmate. The Hebrew word for covenant is berit, and it comes from an Akkadian term which means to clasp or to fetter. So a covenant chains two parties together, just like a contract. In Israel's case, and in our case, the parties chained together are a people to their God, and they are bound to obligations to one another. And for the vassal, which is the smaller party, the primary obligation to the benefactor or to the king is that we do whatever he says. Now, if the covenant was broken by one of the parties, then the other party had the right to either enforce or to terminate the covenant. Israel had rejected their covenant by asking for a king other than the Lord, who would rule as the kings of the other nations. But God's decision, him being the greater party in the covenant, was to not forsake his people, even though they had forsaken him. He has the power position in the covenant. Instead, God chose to motivate Israel to follow his direction by bringing hardship to them. After all, he is the bigger of the two who are chained together. So you're always going to go in the direction of the bigger inmate, as it were. So, if you're a believer, have you chosen to run away from the Lord's leading? Well, you won't get far with those fetters that you're wearing. Our best scenario is to surrender our wills to the Father, recognize that he always chooses wisely, and then follow his lead without trying to fight against him. Furthermore, if you are advising other brothers or sisters as to how they should go, well, then hold them accountable with truth, the Bible, and with grace. Remember that we too are prone to wander. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Groundworks Ministries operates entirely through financial donations from faithful people like you. And if you're being ministered to through the Bible teaching of Groundworks Ministries, and you'd like to help us reach this generation with the gospel, would you consider donating to Groundworks Ministries today? Donating is secure and it's easy at our website. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.